meeting and also question this whole talk about tribalism and sectarianism.
Frontline. As the country is treated to a brand new episode, melodrama in the Blue Party over the National Delegates Conference, police has made it clear that Birigwa and the team will not be given any security, a move that sounds like melodic rhythm to the Najanankumbi faction.
Police will therefore not be ready to provide the required security for the event until the party position is harmonized.
It is very surprising because it appears that the police has taken sides in this position.
We are not involved at all. We just got a communication telling us that you cannot purport or gesticulate to hold a meeting which is not authorized.
The same police that has no ability to provide security to Birigwa and team has with immediate effect halted the NUP country-wide mobilization tours.
Kasanaluwero district, the mobilization activity was used to incite violence, promote sectarianism.
It's only when we came here in Uganda that they decided to brand us sectarian, but it's the same message that we have been giving. And you all notice that those who practice tribalism and sectarianism get very scared when we condemn tribalism.
With the latter emblazoned in fury, the police cites spread of hate speech, sectarianism, and wanton disregard to the earlier agreed and set rules, thus ending the NUP political honeymoon.
We are going to put an end to the mob mentality, bullying and intimidating tactics of NUP radicals against innocent civilians and law enforcers.
I mean, him describing us like radicals clearly speaks to somebody who is doing politics and not law enforcement.
Does the police determine the cases of sectarianism and providing judgment without involvement of courts of law? Is it a clear effort on the fundamental freedoms of speech and expression? Have leaders gone overboard, creating the tribal sentiments in the public, or they exist regardless? Would the country rather focus on substance than form? This is The Frontline. Frontline.
A very good evening and welcome to this edition of The Frontline on NBS TV. My name is Charles Mwangu-Shampagi. We'll start the show in Hoima district, where a by-election for that district's local council 5 chairperson has concluded this evening, and we expect that results should be coming out any moment from now. So even before I introduce the panelists that I have in the studio, let's first switch to Hoima, where Shamim Nabakoza is waiting to give us the latest from there. Then I'll do the introductions here.
Many thanks, Charles. Currently, what is happening here at the Tally Center at Dolly Church of Uganda Primary School is what the Electoral Commission is doing to conclude the tallying, the reading of the results as they have come in from the different sub-counties, 14 sub-counties in Hoima district, as said. And currently, what they're concluding with is the last, which is Shivali sub-county, which has had equally one of the most highly populated polling sessions in this by-election. What we can tell you so far, we can say Uthman, who is the candidate for National Resistance Movement, Uthman Mubarak, is currently leading in the race that should have attracted at least 94,000 voters, which has not done so. And next to him, at least of the results that we have been able to gather, next to him is also NRM-leaning Muhumuza Vincent Savannah, who has been able to garner at least more than 10,000 votes of the 94,000 that were expected to come out today and cast their ballot. Several others have garnered at least votes that are not even more than 5,000. You realize the equally in the line was the National Resistance, the National Unity Platform candidate, Aguda Moses, who also garnered a lot more votes. By the time the returning officer was still counting, he had at least garnered 3,000 plus, and that is the number that they're currently relying on. But we wait to see what they shall be giving us as they do the tallies, as they keep receiving the results. But as of now, the environment is just being cleared to see that there can be reading or declaration of the results as they come in, and declaration of who the winner is. In this race, Charles and the viewers of NBS, it's only the by-election that has attracted calmness in the entire country, but we can reliably inform you that of all the voters that had to turn up today, we can reliably say not 90,000 turned up in this race that had a lot of disturbances, especially the rains that took the entire part of the day up to about 3 p.m. this evening. You realize that most of the race for all these candidates was at least about 100. Uthman could get like 100 more votes than the others when they are racing at about 20 or 10 or 3 sometimes. So he has been in the lead since. Up to now, we wait to see what this Chibale sub-county comes off like, because the returning officer told us this can actually change results of any of these candidates and make them winners. But we can tell you that the situation is normal for this by-election. There's not so much deployment. Yes, it's there as expected because of the people that are here, but it is a usual by-election that would be expected to be taking place anywhere in the country. Very different from the previous ones, very different from even the general election that was here. The IT team that you see behind is one that is working on the results that is from the Electoral Commission, but also the candidates and their supporters and the different party heads are equally here, the mobilization groups of NRM, of the Forum for Democratic Change, of the National Unity Platform. I think the three were the most evident here, and we'll wait to see. In about a few minutes from now, the returning officer, Merab, tells us they'll be declaring who the winner of this by-election is, and we shall be bringing you those details live on NBS, live on Afro Mobile, as either the winners celebrate and also what happens to those that will have lost, because these are 5 candidates we are talking about. Certainly, Hoima District will come out with a winner who will become the LC5 chairman of this very district. We'll be live for the rest of the broadcast on NBS Live and Afro Mobile. But for now, Charles, back to you at the Political Command Center for Frontline.
Thank you very much, Shamim Nabakos. Just to bring all our viewers up to speed, 5 candidates contested in that by-election. They are Musenguzi Patrick from the Forum for Democratic Change, Mugisha Uthman Mubarak from the National Resistance Movement, Muhumza Vincent Savannah, independent at NRM leaning, Aguda Moses from the National Unity Platform, and Mugume Lennox, another independent. Some polling stations early in the morning did not have the sufficient number of 10 voters to open polling, so there were some delays there. But I have received a brief from Crispin Kaheru, who is a commissioner at the Uganda Human Rights Commission and has been an observer in that election. These are some of his observations from the close of polling, which I'd like to share with you. Voting in the Hoima District LC5 by-election concluded without major incidents, despite earlier anticipated tensions. Number 2, there was generally low voter turnout and participation. There wasn't as much excitement as we saw in the rallies, in the turnout of the voters who came. Could this have been due to disruptions by the weather? Could it be just less interest in by-elections? Could it be something else? Crispin thinks that this should be investigated by all those responsible, especially the Electoral Commission and the political parties that participate in these processes. And he says it's incumbent upon stakeholders to address the persistent low voter participation in Uganda's elections. This will require continuous assessment of barriers to voting in specific places or demographics and developing targeted solutions. He says a multifaceted approach is key. This could include ramped-up efforts to educate and engage citizens, simplifying the voting process, combating any forms of voter suppression, and continuously building trust in elections through diverse means. Community leaders and influencers should also be encouraged to promote participation in elections. And he says encouraging civic participation and addressing specific factors contributing to low voter turnout in a given context are crucial steps towards improving voter engagement. And he says some of these proposed interventions may require reforming electoral laws. We have less maybe just a little more than 24 months to the next election, and we haven't seen legislation reforming electoral laws coming up in Parliament, either from the ruling the government or from members of the opposition. Maybe that is something that needs to be looked into. Tonight, we turn our focus to the national mobilization and opening of offices by the National Unity Platform, which now police says it has suspended. Police wrote to the National Unity Platform separately and yesterday issued a statement. I will take time to read through the whole statement as it is, because I think it's one of those very interesting statements, and you have seen the comments that have come around that statement that the police spokesperson, Fred Enanga, read out to the public yesterday. Also, police wrote separately to the Forum for Democratic Change, which has been bickering between, you'd call them two factions, one led by the party president and Secretary General, Nandala Mafabi, who's Secretary General, and Patrick Oboy Amuriat, who's the president, and the other, the guns have been pointing to the Katonga Road office of the People's Government, which is led by Dr. Kiza Besigye. And there's been almost an equal split within the Forum for Democratic Change. It is supposed to be conducting elections to replace leaders who have overstayed their leadership by now close to 3 years because of COVID-19, when the party was not able to transition leadership. So it's delayed, and the party says if it reaches October without electing new office bearers, the party will be facing a constitutional crisis within the Forum for Democratic Change. The lead up to the banning of National Unity Platform's mobilization efforts across the country were sparked mainly by what leader of National Unity Platform, Robert Senta Muchagulanyi, said in Luero. And police in his letter says he's talking sectarianism, tribal sentiment, and others. We need to interrogate that a little bit more closely. One of my guests in studio, I listened to Yusa on the Big Talk with Kanari Mugume the other day, discussing the same subject. So let me introduce who I have in studio here. Starting from the extreme end, from Busiro, Member of Parliament, from the National Unity Platform, the Honorable Medad Segona Lubega Akalia Magwa. Very nice to have you, sir.
Pleasure, and good evening to you, to the panelists and to the viewers out there.
From Mulanda, from the Uganda Media Center, Executive Director and frontliner, Ofono Opondo. I want to go to pronounce the other one because the other day you were discussing with...
I educated him.
You educated?
Knows how to pronounce his name now.
Oh, okay. Mr. Ofono Opondo, very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, and good evening to our viewers. Nice to be back here. Yeah.
From Kanyandahi village.
But you guys have missed something.
Hold a moment.
You have missed something.
Let me do the introduction and then we'll find what I've missed.
He said he's happy to be back.
To be back, yes.
That's Obote.
Yes.
That's how Obote used to say it. So he has joined the UPC, this man.
From Kanyandahi village, Muchiko, in Ruteta sub-county, Brasha County. This is my...
grandfather?
Eh?
Grandfather?
No, I am, yeah, he's my former voter. He is my constituent. Chief Executive Officer at the independent newspaper, magazine, or independent media house, old man of the clan, Andrew Mujuni Mwenda. Very nice to have you.
Thank you so much for hosting an old man.
And from Kira Municipality, from the Forum for Democratic Change, and the frontliner, Hon.Ssemujju. Very nice to have you, sir.
Thank you, Charles.
Missing on the front line tonight, and again, another week missing from the front line, is the Honorable Winnie Kiza, all the way from the Mountains of the Moon in Kasese, and from the Alliance for National Transformation, and the frontliner. She's unwell, but she'll be joining us possibly next week. And we wish you very quick recovery. We know that you're watching the show, so you can text us and participate in the discussion. I need to remind our viewers that this show is running parallel on the Afro mobile app. So you can actually get there early, keep watching so that when we switch later in the show, you're not scrambling to get onto the Afro mobile app to pick the latest on from the NBS Frontline. Gentlemen, it's an all-male show. I want to start with you, Honorable Medad Segona Lubega. I believe you received the communication from the Uganda police stopping your activities before the police came out to the public to share a statement. Are any major differences between what was communicated privately to the party and what was communicated to the nation?
Well, first of all, of course, as a disclaimer, officially I'm not speaking for the party, and therefore I haven't received the official copy of the police letter. I have read one in the social media that has been circulated. I have also seen one Mr. Fred Enanga reading some document of sorts on television. So, and I believe because he has owned up, the contents are consistent with those, that one circulating in social media. Yes.
Okay. So the contents are the same. You have, your party has responded. It says it's going to defy this position. Is that correct?
Well, I have also seen the party's position. I think the word is not defiance, but we made it clear that we shall continue abiding by the law. However,
and by abiding by the law, what do you mean? What is the interpretation of abiding by the law from you?
The text of the law is clear. It is in the laws of the Republic of Uganda. We will continue complying with the law, notifying the police as and when we have a program, just the same way we did it. I think let me not start on a negative note. I want to start on a positive note by thanking those gallant officers who this time round did not interfere with our program, with our meetings. And I am sure that we have been vindicated. And this because we've always said there is no chaos until police starts chaos. We moved together with them. You would see them in the midst of our crowds, and we were working together with them without any problem.
Including the one in Mbale on whom you were pinning, one of your supporters was forcibly pinning posters on his back and on his bike.
I mean, that is humor. And to me, it was okay. In that one, if a citizen comes and pins a poster on a police officer and there is no negative reaction, there is no chaos, to me, that's maturity. People exercise humor differently, and I salute such a person.
You're saluting the one who was pinning it on, or the police officers?
Both. I mean, what is wrong with being humorous, and what is wrong with receiving humor with courtesy, with a courteous reception? I have no problem with any of them. I actually salute both of them. They decorated the day. And my view is we should continue like that. What I meant by following the law is the law requires us, as organizers of public meetings, to notify the police. We shall continue notifying them. Now, this thing they call suspension, first and foremost, they do not have that power. It has been clarified for those who were dyslexic before, I mean, who were not able to read and understand the Constitution of the Republic, because we kept telling them the Constitution does not require us to notify, I mean, to seek permission from you. We had the Police Act, which was making such horrendous requirements. It was struck down by the Constitutional Court. Then there was a reenactment of the Public Order Management Act. Again, that provision was struck down, and the court clarified over and over again that police does not have the power. So if you don't have the power to authorize or prohibit, you cannot have the power to suspend. I think what the police would be doing, is to invite a meeting, to caucus, and say, look, this is where we think you have crossed the red line. How do we address this? Secondly, if they feel, like my president said, if they feel someone has broken the law, I am not averse to anybody being arraigned and prosecuted. But of course, with the caution that we have all the information, and where we are headed, now that we have been provoked, is to lay on table evidence of what we are talking about, the tribalization of management of affairs.
We'll come to that in a moment. Let me read the police statement for the benefit of our viewers. This is the press release. Police suspends NUP mobilization activities till further notice. This is issued from the Public Relations Office. It's number 132 or 01. Yes. And it says, as you're all aware, the police, under its mandate to regulate public meetings under Section 32(1) of the Police Act, granted permission to the National Unity Platform to conduct nationwide mobilization activities and official opening of party offices. Additional guidelines on the proper conduct of the activities were also given, which included proof of permission from owners of venues, gatherings in town halls or appropriately enclosed areas, prohibition of processions, demonstrations, and regulated rallies, acts of incitement to violence, or other public order management violations. While we completely support the right of individuals, groups, and other citizens to peacefully gather or assemble and make their views on matters of public policy, we have noticed that in all areas where NUP mobilization activities have been carried out, there have been total breaches to the guidelines, thus causing public disorder, unnecessary traffic jams, loss of business, malicious damage to property. For instance, in Imbarara City, their rowdy supporters vandalized a Toyota Hiace under registration number UBD 251J, and traffic accidents, including a fatal one in Hoima City on the 11th of September 2023, where a one Mogisa Norman died and 10 others got serious injuries during the NUP convoy. Furthermore, in Kasana Luwero district, the mobilization activity was used to incite violence, promote sectarianism, make illegitimate calls for the removal of an elected government, and issuance of defamatory statements against the person of His Excellency the President of the Republic of Uganda. The press statement goes on to say, in view of the blatant breaches of the guidelines, the activities of the NUP are immediately suspended. This announcement is a follow-up to our communication of the 12th of September 2023 to the National Unity Platform leadership, halting the planned mobilization activities and opening of offices until such a time that they are ready to comply with the guidelines and rules of law. We are sending this strong message that our country, Uganda, will not wait for its villages, towns, urban centers, and cities to burn before taking action to protect the citizens and property. We are going to put an end to the mob mentality, bullying, and intimidating tactics of NUP radicals against innocent civilians and law enforcers. We have very robust plans to uphold rule of law in liaison with other stakeholders, and will respond appropriately against all perpetrators of incitement to violence that can lead to civil unrest throughout the country. Uganda is one of the safest countries in the region and across the globe, and we plan for it to remain that way. This directive stands until such a time when the NUP is compliant and law-abiding. Signed by Katsigazi Tumusime, Major General for Inspector General of Police on 13th September 2023. Mr. Fonopondo, this communication from the police sounds quite activist in suspension.
Well, first of all, when NUP began the mobilization, they wrote to the police. And the police wrote back to them, and they agreed on a number of guidelines, which the police now says NUP is violating. Among those guidelines was notification to the Inspector General of Police and down the chain of command to territorial commanders, DPCs, and so on. Also, that they would agree not to have large processions, especially those that disrupt other normal activities like traffic and so on. So, in that context, one would expect that NUP organizers should abide by the undertaking they made to the police, save for isolated cases where things are spontaneous. like all political activities, you go to open an office and then supporters or just enthusiastic people who want to see what's happening, they crowd. That is understandable. But what appears to be is a deliberate effort by NUP members at various forms of provocation, including messaging. If you were the police officer, you read possible scenarios when those breaches are repeated over and over. You don't want that to become the culture, that people agree on one thing and do another. And so in that respect, therefore, I think the police is right to the extent that it should intervene. Now, what form of intervention should the police make? In that, I slightly disagree with the police because I actually talked to them, to the police, after the incident in Uluweru. I spoke to them and I said, from the political side where I sit, I think that the process of NOP had, generally speaking, gone well. And I also added the political angle. I said, in my view, they were not going to achieve the intended purpose of the mobilization, save for having a roadshow opening offices, because NUP generally, and Kyagulanyi in particular, you can say, has been dead for the last 2 years after election. You could see that the media has not been paying much attention to Kyagulanyi because he has been absent anyway. And so any attempt to be lured into provocation by NUP, by Kyagulanyi, would have the unintended consequence of giving him publicity, probably giving him a cry of victimhood, that he's being frustrated. And I told them, I said, in my view, I think they should call NUP people and say, look, we have observed you the last 2 weeks. Can you change the following areas? Now, if they're adamant, then you can bring the law. You can bring the law. But 2, let NUP people expose themselves by bad behavior. That bad behavior could be being rowdy or insulting other people, abusing them, making unsubstantiated statements. Those ones we could deal with politically. You let them expose that they have no policy message, for example. So you can catch them there. But also you let Ugandans to see NUP for what it is. If it is a sectarian outfit, Ugandans will see them.
So you want the politics to sort out the sectarianism? I
had preferred that the politics,
not the police.
The politics should sort that out. I think it was Richard Dixon, who once said that leave nonsense to fresh air. Fresh air has the ability to cleanse nonsense. So if NUP is saying nonsense, if NUP is promoting sectarianism, if NUP is insulting people with unsubstantiated claims, let us leave the politics to sort them out. But what now the police has done, of course, the law enforcers, what they have done is to give these guys some lease of life. Because for me, I had wanted that Kyagulanyi repeats what he said in Luweru.
In Kasana Luweru.
He goes to Mityana, repeats it. He goes to another place, repeats it. And then we see how he changes when he comes to Mulanda. When he has tried to present himself like a Buganda clan chief, for example. So for me, I thought that politics would sort, or it would sort any other person of that tendency, rather than bring this one. Now we have entered the dispute whether the police has actually, if you don't have power to grant permission, can you have the power to withdraw the permission? But also, if they have injured the reputation of a person, could be a private citizen, you can actually take them to court.
Privately?
Privately. Including the president can take them to court. For example, and I'm not unduly bothered, if somebody says, our gallant people who fought the war came without underclothes, I would respond and say, but Kyagulanyi, 25 years ago, what did you have? So why do you think that the people who came from the bush had nothing, and after 37 years, they should not have anything? You, Kyagulanyi, what did you have 35 years ago? Because for me, I would respond that way, because I think that would. But also, I would help to educate Kyagulanyi. I say, Museveni was a defense minister, was a minister of regional cooperation, had a huge land. He had bought that land of Rwaktura where he is, about 50 acres. He bought it in 1969. That's what he says. When he was a student with his salary as a student, that's what he says. This is what Museveni says, that he bought that land.
You can establish the facts.
Yes, that's what he says. That's what President Museveni says, that he bought that land of Rwaktura in 1969 with his money as a student teacher. He left their cows. So it can't be true that a person who was Minister of Defense, who was Minister of Regional Cooperation, and others, the Jim who were police officers, it can't be true that they had nothing. So I thought that politics...
they were better paid than today.
Yeah, I thought that one would have dealt with the Kyagulanyi insults, rather than...
Police coming in and...
Yeah, because this one is now taking us back to 2020, 2021. My own reading is that part of the reason NUP and Kyagulanyi in particular raised to that level was the manner in which we, the government people, particularly security, handled him.
Okay. Let me just read I think the second has called it the impugned sections, a section that the police is quoting. Section 32 of the Police Act. Power to regulate assemblies and processions. Subsection 1. Any officer in charge of police may issue orders for the purpose of A. Regulating the extent to which music, drumming, or a public address system may be used on public roads or streets or at occasion of festivals or ceremonies. B. Directing the conduct of assemblies and processions on public roads or streets or at places of public resort, and the route by which and the times at which any procession may pass. Should I read on? Of interest, there is section 33 and section 34 are interesting to read. But let me come to Andrew Mwenda and ask, who is reading the law the right way or the wrong way? Because you're looking at the Police Act on one hand.
As you ask Andrew, his candidate for next election has been staging processions.
Can you allow Andrew first answer?
He started in Ichira.
Can allow Andrew first answer the question? There seems to be diverse interpretation or different interpretation between the police and the political actors, especially from the opposition.
Well, first of all,
on the law.
I should tell you, there are two things. There are the tactical issues involved in this discussion and the strategic ones. So me, I want to focus on the strategic ones. One, since NRM came to power, it has always been afraid of allowing its opponents to freely organize. It can always pull some law, quote an incident or things like that, but to justify a common position that opponents of the NRM do not have sufficient space to organize freely. So these other justifications are brought to service a predetermined position that our enemies or our opponents shouldn't organize. They may quote a law, they may quote a constitution, they may quote a specific act of
regulation or something?
Of a bus being burnt down, whatever. It's not that they are lying, it is simply that these are brought to service a strategic aim, which is that the opponents shouldn't be free to organize. So that is one fundamental factor. It's something within the DNA of President Museveni and his NRM not to allow the opponents to organize freely. The second point I would like to make is, at this particular time, the NRM has atrophied. It has high levels of corruption, incompetence, selfishness. I think people don't feel like the government today is there. Okay, not me say general, but many elite Ugandans in urban areas, people who are educated, feel that the government is not there to serve them. That the government is serving the interests of a small cabal of people who are in control of power. So there is widespread social and political discontent in Uganda. So when you see Bobi Wine move through towns and attract that kind of attention, is because those people are expressing this suppressed anger. In fact, I would say what you see in Uganda is the continuous piling up of social dynamite. What has been missing is the supply of effective political leadership with organizational and mobilizational skills to act as what you'd call a detonator of the social dynamite. So that is the broad strategic situation of Uganda. If I was Bobi Wine, the question therefore is, how do I play in that context? If I was to fall to opposition, I feel like they have a textbook response based on ideals they have picked from speeches and statements by Western countries. And therefore they organize without dealing with the reality of Uganda. They deal with the textbook theory. Because I personally feel like the way the NRM system is like, if you study it, it's not a traditional government of Kenya, Zambia, or Malawi, or Ghana. This is a revolutionary group that came to power after protracted struggle, whereby they started from a very small scale in the village and dismantled the state from above. They started from below and dismantled the state. You can see these systems in Vietnam, in Cuba, in China, in North Korea, in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, and Eritrea, countries like that. And you have to know that this is the marketplace, the political marketplace where I am playing. What are the core characteristics of these kinds of regimes? And therefore, how do you structure your response specific to how these regimes are organized? Because they're very durable. Historically, across historic time and geographic space, even when they have suffered prolonged economic atrophy, they have not been able to lose power. So if you're going to organize against them, what are the new strategic moves you need to make to weaken them? I personally felt that Bobi Wine's speeches themselves, he was shooting himself in the foot. Two things. You must, if I was in his shoes, I would want to look at NRM as a likely strategic partner, because many people in NRM do not agree with the way the system itself has degraded in terms of its moral purpose. And even its own spokesperson here, the spokesperson of NRM and the government, you have seen he's not very supportive of what the police has done. So inside NRM, there is a large constituency that sees that A, you are mishandling the opposition, B, you are mismanaging the country. So I would consider those to be internal surrogates. All my campaign must be to appeal to them to act as internal surrogates inside NRM to dilute, weaken the kind of unite. Hold a second.
You're going on what Bobi Wine and the National Unity Platform should have done. You've read, and I just read out you listened. I just read out the police statement signed by Major General Katsigazi. As a journalist, what do you make of it? What do you think they're trying to communicate?
But that's what I started with, yes. Charles. You are trying to focus the debate on the tactical issues, and I'm saying the strategic issues. What police can look for any excuse to try to stop these people's rallies. Museveni has never allowed his opponents to organize, and he will never allow them anyway. What the police are doing is whenever opposition organize, the police have to look for an excuse to stop. But that's just an excuse. It is not, the strategic aim is not to allow opposition in Uganda to organize against Museveni and the NRM.
You're therefore suggesting that the police is working as an extension of the NRM as a political party, not as government.
Does anyone doubt that?
Okay.
You are suggesting that there's somebody in the audience here who thinks that the police in Uganda acts as a neutral party in this contest. And the point I was trying to make is, for me, is that I feel the response of the opposition historically in Uganda has been textbookish. It needs to be to the reality of Uganda's is. I personally feel like they may not be able to capture power but they can make a lot of progress in terms of expanding the spheres of freedom and the space within which they can operate by avoiding putting themselves in a situation where they provide the perfect alibi for police or excuse for police to interfere in them. Why march through cities and towns and create all that chaos? Why? You can organize your rallies outside of those congested areas unless they believe they don't have support for people to walk out of a town and go to a stadium somewhere and attend the
So you think they should be able to empty towns and get people somewhere?
Not only that, but they should also be able, those statements of Bobby Wine are very, as the former opponent was saying, they're very injurious to Bobby Wine's cause. Of course, I would maybe not agree with the, if I was in Museveni's shoes, I would not agree with the former opponent that I let him continue with them and he will expose himself. That is expecting too much rationality out of human beings. Human beings are not that rational. So a guy can run away with such kind of statements and create for you serious political trouble.
Okay.
So a person like Museveni will not want to take chances.
We'll interrogate the statements in a moment. But
Museveni will not want to take chances. But people here spoke for 20 minutes. I have spoken for 5.
No, you haven't actually. I keep watching the clock.
But so I am the one. You know, I'm very keen on the clock.
I know.
Are you worried about what I am saying?
I know how we deal with time on the show. But
so I just was trying to explain that I feel Bobby Wine and Besigye before him structure their debate as us against them. And in trying to structure their political position that way, they lose sight of the fact that there are so many people inside NRM who could become their surrogates, and they need to break that coalition, and there are so many other people in Uganda they need to appeal to who are either apathetic, indifferent, or disinterested in politics to be able to recruit them. So I feel like his message, when I have been following him, he's able to rally the base, but he's unable to grow it.
Okay.
Because his message tends to alienate many people inside NRM who could otherwise be mobilized. It alienates many independents who could be convinced to come into the political arena to participate.
And keeps fence sisters on the fence. Okay.
Yes, he keeps fence. So he tends to solidify his base without broadening his appeal. And I don't know whether...
maybe that's what the police is referring to as no radicals. But I want to bring Ssemujju into the discussion before we take a break. Honorable Ssemujju, one is I need you to speak about... speak to the letter that was written to your party, stopping your own activities, but also broadly speak to this. Both as a journalist, a member of parliament, and a member of the opposition, this police letter stopping NOP's activities and your own activities.
The president, I agree with Mwenda, and Mwenda today really was sounding like the real Mwenda.
The one you used to know.
Can I request you not to go there? Because you were really this video.
No, I am very happy, by the way. The president is hysterical when it comes to big gatherings. You need to go back to history. I remember after the nomination of 1996, he even got a foot ruler to measure the people who were in Koro, and he said he had more people than Paulo Hon.Ssemujju.
Wasn't that 2001? That debate was, I think...
No, that was the Paulo Hon.Ssemujju, 96. I was a student then. He said I had more people, and he was very angry with Monta. In his campaign, he kept complaining against the media that they were photographing USJ with big crowds and him with smaller. In fact, it's part of the reason I know of some journalists who eventually got employed, because they advised him that for you, because of security, you stay far away from the crowds and you are unable to capture you. So this whole design...
And the journalists are not able to come to your side to capture the crowd and capture you in the crowd.
So this whole design of him driving in two crowds during rallies was a result of that. So the crime that Bob Wine has committed, coming to the letter, is a crime of gathering crowds. When Bob Wine knows that Mr. Museveni is hysterical to crowds. So I agree entirely with Andrew that police had to find a reason. I don't think Museveni can watch TV today. In the last elections, including this TV, he was very angry at one time in the cabinet. Bob Wine on TV. He's go to the toilet. He's on TV. He goes to the kitchen on TV when he was quarreling. So, but the crowds themselves have a multiplier effect in politics. I said here when we are discussing Bob Wine, and I think someone was dismissing these tours, that things that have not happened before are now happening. People who lost the NRM primaries or who were in the last parliament as NRM candidate, at least in Busoga, they now felt comfortable associating with an opposition. They think they can win an election. When Bob Wine was in Mayuge, he was welcomed by a former MP. We were with him in the last parliament. So yes, police and all the other institutions of the state in Uganda are run by Museveni directly. They are vulnerable. So when he tells you to stop a rally, you must find the reasons. I remember the Honorable Hon.Ssemujju and Segirinya were released by court in Masaka over all the charges. But Museveni, after quarreling a lot, police now had to find people, some of them I'm not even sure were murdered, and said, okay, now you also have fresh charges of murder. Because the man had said, these fellows, you cannot release them. So this Kasigazi of police and his statement, and you sympathize with them, because they are not the originator of this response. They are just,
as Mwenda referred to it.
Yes, they are just being told this must happen, you must stop them. Then they go to read the law books, where can we hide, where can we pick something. But broadly for me, what bothers me is the civic space in Uganda. If you look, and going back, even if you don't go far away with the newspapers, with the civil society, I remember, I think the last article that Mwena wrote in Sunday Monitor was about the death of Mayombo. At that time, Museveni called Aga Khan. Aga Khan, I think, was busy. He said, you can speak to Annabelle, who was based in France. And that Annabelle was surprised that Mwenda and Kariejira were still in Monitor. He said, what are these boys doing in our newspaper? Because they had written, and by the way, they are very good articles, both of them. So from then, there are things that Museveni used to allow that today he can't allow. I don't know whether it is because when you have young people who are running you, and the state has grown, the interests have grown, so the level of vulnerability surrounding Museveni and those who are around him also feel extremely vulnerable are the ones forcing them to do this. In fact, my own guess, the next elections, you may not have these rallies. Because you see, this has been a build-up. You are just reading this letter of police. There was one from Mukuraiji about the Beret. Then the bombs in Kampala. Up to now, I have no doubt that these bombs in Kampala were not bombs by a terrorist. They were bombs aimed at stopping political meetings, the same way they threw bombs during the campaign to remove age limit at Honorable Chaguranyi, Honorable Sewanyana, and Honorable Kasibante's residence. And they say, no, this one we use for training. No investigation was done. And they did not attribute them this time to terrorists.
You said last week, you said last week that the threat of terrorism cannot be underrated.
Yes.
And you said it here.
Yeah, but...
Yes. So how certain can you be?
No, I said terrorism is real.
Yes.
But I've also said that it can be used the same way Museveni was using COVID to stop the competition from organizing. So it's not that it does not exist, but it can be manipulated. And this time, you can see even the posture of the state when it is under this. I mean, I didn't see soldiers walking on the street like they did last time when there was a scare. This time, the only scare was the statement that there are bombs in Kampala, and the soldiers went to there no more.
Actually, terrorism is real. The question we must investigate is who is the terrorist.
So the letter by police, and I agree entirely with Andrew Mwenda, this old Andrew Mwenda, not the Andrew Mwenda of these days, but the one who was resurrected
not the
today.
spokesperson of the MK movement.
The one who was resurrected today. I am very happy with him. That this is how Museveni does politics. He can't allow you. It is the same reason that Museveni banned political parties when he came here, It is the same reason that they enacted, was it Article 269, eventually removed by court, which was allowing political parties only to operate at their headquarters.
So statutory instrument number 1, Article 269.
Yes, the Public Order Management Act. Even the Political Parties and Organizations Act, I was in Parliament when it was being enacted. And it was trouble, because at that time, the MPs, including, by the way, NRM MPs, because the trick was, if the opposition, the Ben watchers are the ones who are pushing for parties to operate beyond headquarters, Museveni will refuse. There was a connivance that Kagwa should be the one to present the bill. But eventually they discovered that they had removed a clause that was restricting parties at the headquarters. It was removed by Parliament. So that's how Museveni does politics, that he must not allow you to organize. Eventually, if you continue, they will come and shoot at people, they will arrest them, then they will accuse them of sectarian. Because the thing that Bobi Wine said in Uganda are the same things he said in Arua, are the same things he said when he was in Bunyoro. Because in Bunyoro he said, you guys, be very careful with the oil. These guys that Andrew Mwenda has accused of corruption will come and steal oil the same way they are stealing money in Kampala, and you may not benefit. There it was not sectarian, maybe because Bobi Wine is not a Munyoro. When he went to Soga, he was speaking about fishing, and he said, you see, these people who are Andrew Mwenda has accused of corruption, who are stealing money in Kampala, they are the ones who are restricting your access to the lakes, so you cannot continue fishing. So it was the same speech everywhere he went, addressing issues that are affecting communities where he went. So when he spoke about land in Uganda, and land, especially in the greater Ruwero, areas of Nakaseke, areas of Nakasongola, where Museveni's clansmen and
I can see Andrew is timing me, so I'm going to cut you short there.
Are all running farms. So I don't find a difference in Bobi Wine's message.
Let's interrogate.
The message was tailored to the community.
Let's interrogate the accusation of sectarianism and stocking up tribal sentiment after a very short commercial break. We'll be right back.